Joining me right now on the phones, the senior senator from the state of Texas, Senator John Cornyn. Welcome back to the show, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. Good to be with you.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate you coming on today. Obviously, we're 7 days away from the election, and there's just so much to talk about. Let's start off talking about Hillary Clinton, the FBI, and her emails, an issue that for the Clinton campaign I'm sure they wish would go away. They used to really like the FBI director, but they're not big fans of him right now. When you look at this issue of Hillary Clinton's emails and the FBI and what the FBI director announced via letter last Friday, do you think he's out of bounds? Do you think he's doing the right thing?
Well, I think Director Comey didn't have any choice but to acknowledge this new evidence, the 650,000 emails that were resident on Anthony Weiner's computer that apparently Uma Abedin used to archive the emails that were came off of Hillary's illegal server. So, I think Director Comey's put in a very difficult position initially in July when he said they had completed their investigation, and now with this new evidence arising, I don't think he had any choice but to reopen the investigation and to look into the evidence. But in the end, Mrs. Clinton's got nobody to blame but herself for all this mess that she's brought along with her, like a black cloud that seems to follow the Clintons around.
So, some of your colleagues on the left have really gone after the FBI director. I think it was Senator Reid who suggested that Director Comey had violated the Hatch Act. Are they out of line on this? Do you think that that the FBI director, have you seen any reason to believe that the FBI director is acting out of political ill will against the Clinton campaign?
I think the FBI director is doing the best he can with the bad hand that he's been dealt. Perhaps if he had it to do over again, maybe he would rethink the announcement that he made in July that he said no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges against her, but then cataloging all of the extreme carelessness with classified material that arose out of her use of this illegal server. But having said that, and giving Democrats, as you point out, reasons to cheer in July, I think he had a duty to come forward and say, well, now we've got all this new evidence, we're going to have to look into that. And so this, again, Chad, is really a product of the sort of activities that the Clintons have always seemed to engage in, where there's a set of rules and laws that apply to all of us, and they get a special rules that apply to them. And that's true on the email server. It's true on the Clinton Foundation, and you can just go down the list.
I think, and we're visiting with Senator Cornyn, by the way, here on the Chad HD Show. Senator, I think you would recognize this. There are a lot of people who aren't trusting of the government.
Sure.
Yesterday, Loretta Lynch and the Department of Justice offered to help out and speed up the investigation into the emails. Do you agree with that plan of the Department of Justice getting involved and Loretta Lynch getting involved? And, if you're the average American voter, and a lot of American voters who are already distrustful of what's going on in Washington, D.C., can you really trust how this is going to play out if the Department of Justice gets involved and all of a sudden we're looking at, on Friday, everything's wrapped up?
Well, the loss of public confidence in the administration of justice and in the equal application of the laws, I think, is one of the biggest casualties of all this mess. But Attorney General Lynch has a conflict of interest, and she should step aside and appoint a special counsel, which is provided for under the law when the Attorney General herself has a conflict of interest, as she does, serving at the pleasure of President Obama and clearly not wanting to get involved in this case to hold Mrs. Clinton accountable. But then that special counsel, Chad, would then present the facts to an impartial grand jury and then let the chips fall where they may. But right now, it does look like this is being handled more as a political matter rather than a legal matter. And I don't blame people for being skeptical of whether it's going to be handled fairly or not.
If this was a normal case, not involving Hillary Clinton or anyone running for president, is there any way that, in your opinion, from what your years of knowledge, your years of experience, is there any way that this could reasonably be wrapped up in the next 7 days?
No, this is not going to be wrapped up in the next 7 days. And it is, again, it's the fact that Uma Abedin did not produce this computer that had this material evidence on it at the time she was asked to do so. So I think this is not Comey's fault. This is Mrs. Clinton's fault for creating this situation, and her staff, who she relied on, not coming forward and producing the evidence when requested and actually swearing under oath that they had done so when they had not. But again, I think at this point, the only way out of this mess is for a grand jury to be convened, and that's not going to happen as long as Loretta Lynch is driving the train. She needs to step aside, appoint a special counsel, and let the chips fall where they may.
We're visiting with U.S. Senator John Cornyn, and I just have a couple more questions on this issue, and then one more over just the Senate in general and how we're looking there.
Sure.
If we get to Election Day and Hillary Clinton is elected president, and this investigation is still going on, and before she is sworn in, there's an announcement that, hey, we have proof that Hillary Clinton broke the law. We have proof of this. Is it too? I mean, what happened? Is that a constitutional crisis at that point, or I mean, what as a country, what are we looking at if we get to that point?
Well, certainly there have been instances that we've all read about, the Petraeus case and others, where people have actually pled guilty to a crime and paid a fine, and met their responsibilities under the law. But I think most of us are deeply skeptical that if Mrs. Clinton is elected, that actually will happen. I'm willing to let an impartial grand jury make the decision. I think it just needs to be taken out of the hands of politicians, including the president and including those who are playing politics with the law, like Attorney General Lynch, and to let this be decided by an impartial grand jury. But I don't think, obviously, it would be a very serious matter. It'd be unprecedented, but that's what happens when a major political party nominates somebody under an FBI investigation. That potential crisis could in fact happen.
Let's move on. If Hillary Clinton is elected president, there's been two ways of thinking in the Senate from senators that I've heard from. Senator McCain and Senator Cruz actually brought up a possibility of I'll call it a blockade of Hillary Clinton nominees to the Supreme Court. That's been tossed around. I believe one of your other Senate colleagues, Senator Flake, said, no, that's not what we're here for. There's no way we could block for 4 years Supreme Court nominees. Where do you stand on that? Do you kind of look at what Senator McCain and Senator Cruz have said, or Senator Flake? Where do you stand on that?
Well, Chad, I think we need to see what happens on at the election, and we've already got one vacancy that we need to deal with after this election. Hopefully, this will be a nomination that will be made by Mr. Trump and not Mrs. Clinton, and then I think we've avoided all of the concerns that have been raised by Senator Cruz and Senator McCain. So I prefer not to speculate at this point on what might happen. I'm still hopeful that we'll elect the Republican nominee on November the 8th, and this will all be a moot point.
I'm going to ask you to speculate one more time, but this time it's over the Senate in general. I know you and other senators have been working pretty hard at retaining a Republican-controlled Senate.
Right.
Where are we right now in your mind? Do you think that Republicans keep hold of the Senate, which is, no matter what happens, I think very important?
Well, right now we have 54 Republicans, 46 Democrats, or people who vote with the Democratic caucus. And we're playing primarily defense because all of the people who are running in 2016 were elected in 2010 in a non-presidential election year. So what happens at the top of the ticket does have some influence. And as you know, this race continues to be very close for president. But I would say that I feel optimistic that if the election were held today, that we would maintain the majority in the Senate. And I can tell you that regardless of who's elected president, they're going to need some responsible partners in the Senate and in the House to try to govern our country. That's going to be a huge challenge no matter what happens.
Senator John Cornyn, as always, we appreciate your time, and we'll let you deal with the craziness for the next 7 days in Washington, D.C., and then we'll visit with you after the election.
Okay, Chad, thank you.
Thank you. And that's U.S. Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad HD Show.